Human beings are drawn towards catastrophe in ways we rarely like to admit. We slow down beside car crashes, crowds gather around fires, and millions of people watch footage of wars and riots, shootings, and disasters online despite insisting they wish they hadn't seen them. This instinct is ancient. Long before television or the internet, people gathered to watch executions and duels and shipwrecks and battles. Not secretly either, they openly and enthusiastically watch them because disaster interrupts reality. Routine collapses suddenly and something primal takes over human attention. The nervous system becomes hyper-aware. Every detail feels sharper, and psychologically witnessing catastrophe creates a strange dual sensation. You have fear and relief. Fear because destruction is happening nearby, and relief because it's happening to someone else. That contradiction sits underneath almost all disaster spectatorship. Ancient crowds gathered at temples and beneath scaffolding. Modern crowds gather around phone screens. It's the same nervous system, but a different technology. I don't believe that people fully understand how instinctive this behavior is until they experience it personally. Years ago, my wife and I were sitting in our tiny one-bedroom apartment sitting above a tattoo parlor when I noticed the back window glowing orange. At first I thought maybe it was the sunset reflecting strangely through the blinds, but the color wasn't correct. So we walked towards the back of the apartment, and out the back window we see smoke rising between the buildings nearby. We ran downstairs and outside before we even fully understood what we were looking at, and the first thing I remember once we hit the street was the smell. Burning insulation and plastic and wet smoke. Across the street and down the alleyway there was an apartment building completely engulfed in flames. The windows were shattered, black smoke climbed into the night sky. I immediately called my friend Dustin. Well, we moved closer. And by that point, police cars and fire trucks were already flooding the street. And then something strange started to happen that I actively participated in. People started emerging from everywhere. Apartment doors opened, cars stopped in the road, pedestrians changed direction instinctively. The crowd formed almost immediately. Nobody wanted to leave, nobody was cheering, nobody was celebrating, but everybody watched. And while this entire building was actively burning to the ground, my phone started to vibrate constantly in my pocket. When I looked, it was friends calling me, family texting, people asking, "Are you okay? Is your apartment on fire? Was that your building?" There was something surreal about standing there watching flames consume an apartment complex while answering casual phone calls in the middle of it. Like modern life had no idea how to emotionally process catastrophe anymore. Part of the city is burning to the ground, and simultaneously everybody's trying to verify whether or not I was personally attached to the disaster before deciding how afraid to feel. And afterward, me and Dustin went to the bar. Something that's kind of weird about being human is after witnessing something overwhelming, you instinctively try to return to normality as quickly as possible. So we sat there with another friend drinking, and the smell of smoke still clung to our clothes, and everybody in the bar kept talking about it like they had collectively attended the same concert. Disaster becomes social almost immediately. Stories begin to form before the ashes cool down, and that's the part I wonder about. How naturally human beings gather around destruction. We all stood there silently watching this building burn while more and more strangers arrived to witness it for themselves. I don't think it's because people are evil, but because catastrophe commands attention at a biological level. For a few minutes, complete strangers become emotionally synchronized. Everybody staring into the same flames, everybody feeling the same nervous electricity in the air. And modern media has amplified this instinct enormously. Today, the average person witnesses more death and violence online in a week than many historical populations experienced in years. Plane crashes, war footage, police shootings, natural disasters, public meltdowns, political assassinations. Human suffering became permanently accessible, and something strange happened alongside that accessibility. Violence has become an aesthetic. With cinematic footage and reaction videos, true crime narration, slow-motion destruction, people profiteering off of disaster for capital gain. Disaster is transformed into consumable media, which creates a very modern contradiction. Human beings are more visually exposed to catastrophe than ever before while remaining physically distant from it almost all the time. Most people never witness real violence directly, but they watch endless representations of it. And maybe that's because disaster temporarily forces people to feel present. Ordinary life is repetitive, with work, bills, schedules, scrolling. Catastrophe breaks routine violently enough to command your full attention, which is why major tragedies dominate public consciousness so completely. Not because people care, but because disaster cuts through psychological numbness instantly. And the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this is simple. Human beings do not only fear destruction, but we're fascinated by it. We always have been, and we probably always will be.